Ani bujo anishna Myeengun Henry cause dashkan zibi and onjiba Myeengun dem. Just thought I would open the show up today by saying hello and welcome. You know, this is another beautiful day. We're in June now, and our elders used to talk about June being a very important month. This is the month that the strawberries come out. So in our language, we say O de min gizis, and that's a reference to the first medicine that grows in the summertime. So we're really excited about June being a month that starts to celebrate our beautiful plants that starts to grow. And here at Nish Vibes, we talk about various things. We bring information, current events, music from Indigenous people. We have great conversations with guests, and we try our best to bring to you some attention to some things that are important in the Indigenous world. And so this is why Nish Vibes had built itself to be a platform for those things. And it's been really nice over the years of speaking to you and celebrating the role that I have here at the university as the Indigenous Knowledge Keeper for the Faculty of Health and throughout the university. An exciting week next week coming up with convocation ceremonies. We have 14 ceremonies to do in a row. So we get to celebrate with all of our students who have made it through their 4, 5, 6, 7 years of education and now receive their doctorates and degrees. So it's a really exciting week, and we have a lot of great graduates. We graduate about 8,000 graduates in the summertime. And so we get to watch every single one of them cross the stage. And they have an Indigenous component to convocation now. And so we bring the drum up. We bring our Eagle staff, which is behind me. And we have openings and closings for a long-time event. And now that we're included, that's part of the indigenation process that the university has committed to. And it's been just wonderful. It's a good feeling to know, especially when we see Indigenous students graduate and come across the stage, sometimes in their full regalia. They'll come across and very proudly demonstrate who they are. And now we have our teepee outside, and we have our Indigenous gathering space. So during or after the ceremony, people will congregate outside and see an Indigenous presence here at the university. So lots of things have happened, and I'm very grateful to the team who worked together really hard on trying to bring indigenization to the University of Waterloo. So I wanted to say before we go into our interview, this week was a challenging week for First Nation people. As you might be aware, there was a bill passed by the Ontario government which kind of oversteps the work that Indigenous people have in protecting the environment. Bill 5 has now become part of Ontario law, but First Nations are protesting and showing their frustration over not, I guess, sidestepping all the treaties and the work that we've done to try to protect the water, the land here in this region. And so heading off, being with the chiefs this week in London at the Nishnabek Nation General Gathering, the feeling, of defeat sometimes comes across, because you feel like you're growing and you're building, and a bill like this comes across, and without consultation with First Nations, it really sets a very sour tone. And so we'll be working with that over the next little while, trying to work with a history of non-consultation. Canada does have a legal duty to consult with First Nations, and with the passing of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we have to start acting in a better way with each other. So we'll keep you up to speed with what's happening with that, and hopefully we'll be able to create a better balance, especially for our future generations to come, our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They deserve our generation to make better decisions so that the water that they need for survival will still be here. the air that they breathe will still be clean enough to breathe. And with that said, I want to welcome you to the show. Christine Peters is here, and I'm going to let you know that this is not your first visit. You got a chance to come here a while back, but we wanted to redo the show because we couldn't hear you very well. Our technical component to that show was a little bit under what it should be, but we wanted to have a conversation with you again today about the things that we're doing together at the hospital that you work with and other hospitals in the region, and to talk about these important things, these developments that are happening. So welcome to the show, Christine.
Thanks for having me back.
Always an honor to have you. We've got to know each other quite well over the last little while, the last year and a half, 2 years or so. There was something in our agendas to try to work with a population that was kind of sidestepped in health-wise, right? If you ever think about the life expectancy of Indigenous people, it's just not where it should be. And health has a lot to do with that. So you as a professional in the healthcare industry, a nutritionalist, all the things that you do administratively, I think we've collaborated quite well. And let's talk about some of those things. But before we do, I want to do something here. One of the things that Indigenous people have been doing for a long time was, when we get together, our thoughts and ideas sometimes we talk about so many things. So we try to keep it all together by performing a ceremony. And the ceremony I'd like to offer on Nish Vibes today is our smudging ceremony. Imagine a few years ago, we didn't have the ability to practice the ceremony because of various laws and problems that we had with it. So today, here at the university, we have every right to practice our ceremonies, our smudging ceremonies, and we'll actually do that today. So I'm going to light up some sage for us, and we'll take some of that sage and we'll smudge ourselves first. So I'll pass this over to you, and you're welcome to smudge yourself. And perfect. So this is one of our ceremonies that has now become pretty regular around here at the university. We do smudging ceremonies for all the students that can come and to participate and learn about it. So I appreciate you taking time to do a little smudging ceremony with me this morning. So, Christine, tell me about yourself. Tell me who you are and where you come from and what you're doing these days.
Sure. So I come from Manitoba. I grew up about an hour and a half south of Winnipeg with 3 brothers. I blame that for my tenacity. And we're now all kind of spread out. My oldest brothers, my only nieces, are out in Vancouver. I got 2 brothers in Winnipeg, and I ended up here in Ontario. I ended up here when I was pursuing to become a dietitian. At the time, you had 3 applications across Canada, and I chose to throw my hat in the ring over in Toronto at St. Michael's Hospital. And so that's where I started my journey here in Ontario as training to become a dietitian. And then I ended up in Kitchener-Waterloo to cover a mat leave for my first job. And it just kind of went from there. Very unexpected, but I know I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Wow, that's a nice journey. Yeah. I mean, it takes some challenge to go to a place where you're not used to, especially a big city like Toronto. It's a big change from Winnipeg, I guess, in a sense, for size-wise, but you took on that role. And how long did you work there?
So the training was just under a year. Okay. It's kind of like a really shortened residency for doctors, right? Like you spend a year in the hospital doing different rotations, learning about taking what you learned in school and applying it into real-world settings. So I think most of the learning is really once you start that year of training. So I did that for a year, and then I taught for a bit at George Brown College
Oh,
to culinary students, chefs, pastry chefs, about the nutrition course,
okay.
right? And then ended up here. But I would say we were only allowed to apply, I think I said 3 locations across Canada. And as I read about the different programs, it was St. Michael's, now Unity Health. It was the Inner City Health, right? Like the really, I think it seemed like a really human hospital focused on caring for diverse patients with different challenges and different ways of life. So that's kind of what brought me to Toronto. Yeah.
So, like nutrition, there's a big Indigenous population in Manitoba, and I'm aware of that. I don't know how closely got a chance to know them at all or not, but when I think about nutrition and how lack of nutrition in First Nation communities plays a big role in health, was there any of that idea, like especially at George Brown, there's a Native population there too. Did you encourage Indigenous students to join you in that role?
At George Brown?
Yes.
Looking back, I was given my students, and I didn't know.
Okay.
And I probably didn't have even the foresight to ask, to really figure that out. Right?
But I guess just since now, or since you left there, you've been involved with the Indigenous community.
Yes.
Maybe that role, like knowing the health of Indigenous people today, might have helped you, what you know now, probably then.
Well, I look over the curriculum, and a lot of the curriculum that I taught at the time, and it was given to us, right? I was just one of the kind of instructors that came on. It was very focused on, macronutrients, different health conditions. Definitely not so much around food insecurity, social determinants of health, and how food and nutrition should be adjusted and how you can meet people where they're at depending on that, right? To provide the best nutrition possible. So I'm hoping there's been some changes to the curriculum since. Yeah.
So people like yourself can make some suggestions, I think, to add to that, component now that you've known more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's not what you brought to Waterloo, though. Like you came here on a mat leave for a different type of role?
So I came on a mat leave to be the dietitian in the specialized mental health unit at Grand River Hospital at the time, now known as Waterloo Regional Health Network. And that unit was quite a bit different than a lot of the acute units in the hospital, whereas patients were coming in quite unwell, needing longer term titrations in their medications. They were more treatment resistant. So patients with like major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar. So they would be on the unit for weeks, sometimes months at a time, or even longer. So the role of the dietitian was quite unique in that space, because it was less about those acute nutrition concerns, and it was more about providing some education for discharge and independence that would align with those patients' needs, skills, abilities, finances, etc. So as they became a little bit more well, we would do education. And then, of course, right, interventions while they were in the hospital, but more around capacity building and training and learning as they were discharged. So I had an amazing time. I would take them grocery shopping. Sometimes we would cook foods together, introduce to new foods that would be, like one of the big concerns was, right, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, right? So a lot of the easy, affordable foods would amplify those conditions. So trying to introduce both affordable options and options that would be healthier for them.
So they were interested in the social determinants of health more than like in the education sector, I would say.
Like in that role?
Yeah.
I definitely was.
No, you were.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. No, but I think that was, like, that unit definitely, I would say, was a very unique unit in the hospital. And I'm always very thankful that that's where I started my career, because we were really encouraged to meet the patients where they were at. And it was very well understood that, I think the social determinants of health was a big focus on the unit.
Is that unique to different hospitals, do you think, or is it just is that kind of common in the healthcare field to look at those specific areas?
I think every hospital has some focus, and definitely I think certain units have a lot more of a focus than others, just as a product of the type of population that often are in those units.
Right.
But when I look back at my training of going to St. Mike's, right, and then working in other hospitals here and with other hospitals here, like that, again, that's what really drew me to St. Mike's, right? Like they had a very strong focus on the social determinants of health, food insecurity, and providing care, the best care possible for the population. So I think it's a culture that the hospital also has to choose to really take part in.
Absolutely.
Do they see themselves as having, are they just there to care and fix disease, or are they there as kind of like that holistic social institution as well?
So how did this world start blending with an Indigenous world at the hospital? Like, where did that begin with for you?
For me? So after I was a dietitian in specialized mental health, I became a dietitian in the cancer unit or the cancer program. Had no intention of being a dietitian in cancer care, but there were very few jobs, and the opportunity arose, and it was permanent full time, and so I had to take it. And what I found in cancer care was there was a lot of provincial oversight, which also meant there was a lot of direction on where we should go and a lot of encouragement to challenge the status quo, continue to evolve and grow. So I ended up going back and doing my master's at University of Toronto. And then after that, I worked in a regional role for the regional cancer program. So the regional cancer program is responsible from primary care, cancer treatment like chemotherapy, surgical interventions, all the way to end of life. So the full spectrum. And so that we work with all of the hospitals that provide some sort of cancer care in the region, as well as primary care and cancer screening sites and stuff like that. So that's a role I took on specifically on more of the patient side. So I was the person-centered care lead. There's 14 regional cancer programs in Ontario. 10 out of those 14 regions had a regional Indigenous cancer lead, Indigenous cancer navigator, and Indigenous cancer coordinator. We were one of the 4 regions that didn't have that role. So when I took on the regional lead role, I also took on that regional Indigenous role as well. And so with a lot of support from the Indigenous Cancer Care Unit, we embarked on developing the first First Nations Inuit Métis regional cancer plan for Waterloo, Wellington. So I will admit I was very green going in. I had really great supports from the province, and our first order of business was to get to know the local community here, to try to sit down one-on-one with the local community leaders and organizations and understand who they were, who we were, what was going well, what opportunities there were. So that's kind of how I got into it, and I think that was 7 or 8 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you started meeting community members here. Yes. And started hearing stories maybe about Indigenous health or history of Indigenous hospitals and First Nations? Absolutely.
So I think that was what hit me right off the bat was, actually what hit me, but, our focus was cancer care, right? That's where the province was focusing, Cancer Care Ontario at the time. And what I kept on hearing from community was their experience in the hospital, their experience with healthcare, right? The barriers to care, the treatment, the experiences when they came into the hospital, the lack of openness to Indigenous ways of knowing and healing. And I think it just really, it was a really big eye-opener, if I'm to be honest, about, the gap in how community experience care here in our local hospital, right? And I think, that avoidance of the hospital when they needed it, or going to the hospital at all costs, right, really, really struck me, and I couldn't let it go, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when things strike you, so deeply and you want to make some changes, I think the facts start to come true. We start looking at places in the north where there's a lot of racism in healthcare, policing, and other areas of, general lifestyle. But here in this region, we have a large population, a lot of it from the universities and colleges that are here, and a lot of home-based people here. So I think for some reason, I think the hospital finally started catching on that something needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how long I've been involved with the hospital now. It's been a while now, but
I think it's 3 years.
About 3 years now.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how I came into it.
I remember how you got involved.
Well, remind me, because I can't remember.
So UMA, we had just hired the first manager of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was still working on the hospitals or on the cancer program side. And then I had a wonderful colleague, Trudy Rose from Spiritual Care, who had been providing a lot of direct patient care and support and had built some relationships with community. So I think it was, National Indigenous History Month or National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And UMA got your name and called you up and asked, do you have some tobacco? How do I get some tobacco?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And her daughter is a university student here. So I think you met her daughter, gave her some tobacco, and I think the rest is history.
Okay. Yeah, that's right, too, now. Thanks for reminding me of that. Yeah. And that, what a really important point in my life, too, to meet UMA and look at something we can do together. Also got a chance to meet Sarah Falwell from St. Mary's. I've done like intermittent focus groups meetings and stuff like that over the years and stuff like that. So I guess my relationship had been there. We just never solidified anything until you came along. And then your role changed, though, after a while, and you became a person that supports the Indigenous community.
So my VP of Cancer Care and myself put together a proposal, along with some other people supporting, put together a proposal to the hospital to take this out of cancer and into the hospital. We asked for the hospital to start, making that commitment, looking at some initial work. And so they asked me to help support that initial phase of work. And now I've been supporting it for 2.5 years.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah, it's been an honor.
So I guess we came to know each other then.
Yes.
Through, I guess, UMA and the work that we were doing. Okay.
Yes.
And I thought we thought of something like maybe, what can we do? And I think the fires, was one of the things we thought might be.
Yeah, I remember we started with, a sacred fire, our first one ever. And then I think you and I talked and we were like, we should do another one. So then we did another one. And then I think at that sacred fire, if I remember right, we talked about doing this every season.
Yes.
Right? And I think then we just, as you and I always do, then we just did it.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Right?
And the ideas started coming through, and we've grown since then quite a lot, over this time. But deep conversations that we've had, and then we were able to bring the executives at the hospital along with this. They came to the fires, and just for the public's view, something happened at one of those fires. It was actually a person that was passing away at the hospital, and the family came out, and I think that's what he was needed. He was lingering for a while, and when they put tobacco in that fire, within like an hour or two from that, he passed away. And it was, I guess, kind of magical in a sense, because he needed that ceremony. He needed to have that tobacco sent to Creator in that fire. And the family, I think, helped him along with that path. And the hospital was so, comforting in that moment. So I remember Ron, who was the CEO at the hospital, heard of this story, and I think it touched him too. Like when I think about now, he brings that up every now and then, like he grew up in a community where there are Indigenous people, like in Sault Ste. Marie area, but I don't know how deep that role was. And now that he's the leader of this hospital, Grand River at the time, I think it sparked the leaders. Bonnie was there at one point, and she was considering that. So I think that's where we started working. What can we do together? There's so much spiritualness about those ceremonies, and not just for Indigenous people, but even for non-Indigenous people to come out and put tobacco on behalf of their families. And I think we started exploring, we need space. I think there's to do what we need to do. And I remember we did a tour with Bonnie, who used to be the second in command there. And there's no space in that hospital. It's jam-packed every inch, every corner. But we were trying to figure out a spot. I remember that tour.
Yes. Yeah, we were looking for a healing space specific outside of the sanctuary space.
Yes, yeah. And Trudy being so kind, she always opened up the sanctuary for our ceremonies.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember one of the ceremonies you came to me after and said, Chris, there's some Indigenous staff here. I think they're willing and interested in helping. And I remember that quite clearly. And Uma was putting together employee resource groups, ERGs. And so we started talking about doing a call out for Indigenous employees to help. And we got a pretty good amount of interest. And so I just think about how those, I think what you and I do best is we talk and we have ideas, and then we take action. And now we have a really robust employee resource group who have done art installations. They helped guide the land acknowledgement, helped roll out education to staff. They're now starting to do monthly smudging ceremonies. And you know what? I think sometimes we overcomplicate things, right? It starts with an idea, a test, an invitation, and let it grow.
Plant that seed and it'll grow. And if you do things that are good, you'll attract people too, because not everybody identifies as being Indigenous that works at the hospital, right, for various reasons. But I think we've got a really nice group of people now that, actually formed an Indigenous employee circle.
Yep.
And they're very active now, I think. We just had drum making workshop just the other day, and so many things that have now brought Indigenous perspectives into the hospital.
One of the things that I've observed that I found really exciting the last little while is, I think you and I, the employee circle, we were kind of pushing out a lot of things, right? Creating space, inviting people to learn. And now what I'm finding is the number of things coming to me and then to the circle and now the advisor circle, asking for advice, guidance, because they're identifying how this fits into their work and they want to take a leadership role in doing it. That's the shift I've seen in the last little while that I find really exciting too, where it's becoming part of people's thinking about the work they're doing and wanting to advance things. Yeah.
So that grew even further. We now have an Indigenous Advisory Council that's comprised of community members. And that was an idea we had a while back, but how are we going to make this work? Is there funding for it? Is there capacity for it, at the hospital? And we brought the leaders together for dinner one time in Cambridge, and Peter came up. I'm sorry, Peter, I did it again. I call him Peter, and he's Patrick. That's going to be a bad thing for me, because now that I've said it the first time,
it's always going to be.
It just pops in my mind now.
I don't think he'd be overly offended.
I hope not. I just feel like, sometimes something gets caught in your mind. It just happens. So
you can't shift it.
And Patrick was one of our guests not too long ago here at the hospital, but he came along with this too. And where do they fit? It's not Grand River at the time. They were Cambridge Memorial. So we went to visit them, I think, at one point when they had one of the workers there, and the conversation struck, maybe we should amalgamate these community members, because some of them come from Cambridge, right?
Yes, yeah. One of the things that I think move things along as well was SOHAC hired, and the Southwest Ontario Aboriginal Health Access Centre hired a Indigenous navigator.
Right.
And I remember I would chat with her, and she would be like, Chris, all of the hospitals, you're all asking the same questions, right? And she started, as she would get questions from hospitals, she'd be like, well, this hospital's kind of working on it already, like, talk to them, right? And she started connecting us and saying, like, can you talk to each other? And then I think you, in our conversations with you and community, we heard, like, we really want to, it shouldn't matter which hospital we go to, we should get kind of the same, it should be a similar approach, right? And so I think, so the three hospitals, kind of the leads that were doing the work, we started working together and meeting regularly. I just think about how, like, there's all this work happening at different angles that kind of brought this together so that we could embark on some of those bigger goals, like an Indigenous Advisory Circle.
I want to throw all my happiness out to Katrina. You know, she's foundational piece of all this. She's
100%.
We burned her out like she was just overworked.
Yep.
Trying to, work with administration and patients and bring ceremony together. And it was just too much for one person to do. Yeah.
I think that's what my learning working with Katrina, and it's something I took back to the hospitals, like, and we heard clearly from SOHAC too, right? It's like, we would never ask a frontline nurse who's providing direct patient care to play all of the roles in the hospital, right? To advise on community engagement, to advise on building a new hospital. So that was a conversation we had quite a bit internally. It's like, we can't do that to the Indigenous navigator either. It's on us to build and to hire and look for ways to, meet all of those needs.
But I think even at that time we were wondering about the commitment from the hospital. Like, okay, you understand that there is need, and then you can't always turn to the Indigenous organizations to supply all that need.
Yes.
So internally, I think there was a discussion about, let's take on a role, maybe a navigator that could be funded through the hospital.
Yep.
And that took place.
So we actually, I think this is fresh within the last month. I don't think the news release has even gone out, right? So with SOHAC in partnership, we hired a dedicated navigator to Waterloo Regional Health Network, which now includes, like, the Chicopee, which is the previous Freeport, Queens Boulevard, previously St. Mary's, and then the KW site, which is now Midtown, right? So really excited to see that growth.
To coincide with the two that are there now for cancer, right?
Yeah. And then, right, I mentioned earlier on, we were one of the few regions that didn't have funding for the Indigenous cancer role, and we just hired for the Indigenous Cancer Coordinator, responsible for implementing a regional Indigenous cancer plan, and the Indigenous Cancer Coordinator, responsible to support patients all across Waterloo, Wellington on their cancer journey. So that'll be 3 navigators in the region now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still not 24/7, but we're always got to grow somewhere, and we got a chance to meet other hospitals like London and watch what they've done. So they've been so cooperative with us, Colleen and Chantel. So willing to share what they've experienced. So I think we've opened up a Southern Ontario basic partnership and relationship, gathering to look at the best practices and to grow here in this region.
Yes.
And now we formed the Indigenous Advisory Group, which is, like I mentioned, comprised of members of the community who's been active now since about December of last year. And we're still building our terms of reference and building that up. But what dedication, when the CEO, is committed to this group, and the decision makers at the hospital are committed to this. And then I know your roles have come and gone and restarted again a few times. So I think the learning process of what we can do together is, because I look at your role as, we need somebody in your role because the mechanisms of the hospital, which the advisory council doesn't know. So we need somebody to aid us through that.
Yes.
that governance structure or whatever it is, so that we can start making good decisions on better quality healthcare.
Yes, absolutely.
And you bring a lot of good ideas, so I think that's really the important part.
Too many ideas.
Well, there's never too many ideas. It's a matter of what
Sifting
ideas can we
them.
make work.
Yes.
Some of them have to linger for a little bit, but
For sure.
know.
Yeah.
But that's what I like when we have our conversations. We can explore things and how we can possibly make it work.
Yes.
So that's where we're at right now with our groups. Like, they even wanted to change the name, not so much as an advisory, but a co-creation.
Yes.
And that was brought in by Ron, who at a meeting said, I don't want you just to tell us or give us your thoughts, but help us create.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like,
I think that was our second meeting, if I remember.
Yes,
correctly,
it was.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I really took that and the group has taken it very serious.
Yes. Yeah. That came out when we were looking at our terms of reference last meeting, right?
That's right.
Adjusting that language so it really is that partnership, co-creation.
And that's unique. That's unique. I sit on advisory councils, and it doesn't feel that co-creation component, where I think the ones who sit on this committee are very honored by that. So we got challenges still. Like, there's going to be challenges. We know our history hasn't been very, very nice to Indigenous people. Our life expectancy hasn't risen where it should be yet. But I think to play a role in this at a hospital, I think we have the foundational pieces now in place.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where we grow, from here. Like, meet those challenges and learn from those challenges, right?
Yes.
And they're going to be there. Like, we just can't fix everything like right away, because we'll have community members now. They have an advisory council who they can talk to about things.
Yes.
Normally they would just bash the hospital, and they probably still will, but at least there's a zone there now.
Yeah.
That gives us some insight to that.
Totally.
So if we can kind of, and that's kind of what I thought too with this group, is like to ease some of the pressures in the community, to know that everything's not perfect yet, like
it's going to take time,
but we'll get there if we keep working at it.
100%.
And if you have the personalities there that make those decisions, willing to do that, which we do have right now, I think we can move forward quite quick.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And now we have some of those feet on the ground inside the hospital too, right? That can help
Absolutely
put this in place. Those coordinators and navigators.
But what I even found exciting was even looking ahead with the new hospital. Like, there's going to be a brand new hospital built in this region, but it also nestles on the fact that we did an Indigenous ceremony on the land.
Yes.
So the connection between that hospital and the University of Waterloo is they collaborated on a piece of land. And now that the land has been identified, we brought our Eagle staff, we brought our pipes there. We asked for that land if it was willing to, honor the role that it was going to take place there. And I don't know if that's ever been done before. I remember living in North Bay, and they built their hospital, and I think they talked about it, but I don't think it ever happened. But here it happened, and that's how deep it is. Even with the architects of the new hospital, we have an Indigenous architect who's helping design the hospital.
Yeah, he told us that this project is, I think, one of the earliest projects they'd ever been brought in on.
Yes,
I believe. And we heard that from when we talked to Six Nations. We heard that as well. Right? Pleased that we weren't almost ready to build, and now we were engaging. But we started, I think, talking to community when we were just deciding on our design principles. What are the principles that we want to guide the hospital? Land hadn't been selected, right? And what are the principles we want to choose the piece of land? I think we so very early on is when we started those discussions, which I'm really glad about.
Well, even with the name, they consulted with First Nations, before they even changed the name to what it is now.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've been kind of involved with this, all the way through the whole process, which is I'm very proud of.
And isn't that the goal, right? Yeah. And now now that we're Waterloo Regional Health Network, right? We're talking about We're going to have a new mission, vision, and values. We're going to have a new strategy, right? And so the opportunities and the foundation is there for us to work together to make sure it's embedded.
And also what we've done here at the university is we've established some land which is right adjacent to the new hospital,
Yes.
which will house sweat lodges and learning lodges and eventually a land-based learning school. So people at the hospital can actually utilize this land to come over
Yes.
and do healing ceremonies there too. We can do them over there too, but you know, we can work together on this, and hopefully we'll get more
Well, and
trust, I think.
the guidance from you and the Indigenous Employee Circle and others was that, you know, where we place the healing space in the hospital should be adjacent, easily accessible, right? So the hospital and the architects and everyone took that very seriously.
Yeah. I'm just proud of it, you know, now that I think about what we've done in 3 years, you know, like building this up and where we are right now. Like I said, there's challenges, you know, we have to approach the inhabitants of this land. You know, we went to 6 nations. There are challenges there at times, you know, about governance structures, but we're moving forward with it. At least we're opening a conversation. Mississaugas was a credit, you know, like also, you know, who existed on this land. So in honor of all of those, I think, you know, it really starts this off in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, to meet those challenges will be our job, but definitely something that we've already established, you know, in a good way.
Definitely.
And we're talking about a commitment ceremony, you know, in the fall, maybe. You know, we haven't worked it all out yet, but I got a chance to meet with the board of directors, and they actually hold an eagle feather now, which was not so much like how a person would get an eagle feathers for their accomplishments and things like that. But this feather is more for a reminder that they've made commitments and they understand Indigenous health is really needing some improvement. So the feather is really to guide them while we go through this process. So it was given to them for that purpose, just to remind them. Every time you see that feather, they'll say, when we're making decisions on this hospital, remember there's a group of people that really need to be uplifted in their health care. And so we're you know, I'm hoping they can, the advisory or the employee council can bead it and get it all decorated and stuff like that. And so we got some work to do with it, but that's fine.
We'll get it done, without a doubt.
So you personally, though, I just want to know where this fits in your heart. Like how have you changed? What have you observed? How have you grown, especially in terms of the Indigenous community?
That's a big question, Myeengun.
Yeah.
I think I've spent when I look back over who I was a few years ago and who I am now and how I work and how I want to work, I don't feel like the same person. I think one of my observations that has really hit me recently is, you know, there's different ways of doing and knowing, right? There's a hospital culture, and there's a diversity of Indigenous culture as well. And I think the more time I spend working with community, and the more I feel this is the way I want us to work. This is the way I like to work, right? In conversation, in relation, in partnership, coming together, discussing, dreaming, and then making things happen together. So, you know, the hospital is a really complex system. You need to maintain some semblance of normalcy and operations, a lot of, you know, rules and regulations and process and things like that. But I think it's really challenged me to think about, you know, how do we ensure that both have a place, right? We need to keep patients safe, but we need to challenge the way we do things, right? We need to adjust, right? And so I think, I can't even explain it, but I think that knowledge about what needs to happen has just become so deeply ingrained or in my heart that it's something I feel very, very strongly and very passionate about, right? That there's so much to learn. There's so much, we can provide so much better care to not just the community, but to not just the Indigenous community, but to all communities, if we can shift some of how we work and learn from each other and bring those values into the work.
So this is what I like to ask. The Indigenous community's been hurt,
Yes.
residential schools and racism and, non-compliance to
Yes.
our treaties and things like that.
Yes.
So I think you've now become aware of there's anger in the community,
Yes.
and mistrust. So I think we like to work in First Nation communities, people with the heart, but you also,
Yes.
it also comes with reality.
100%. Yeah. Truth comes before the reconciliation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you manage that with your own personal professionalism? Like, I know you can't answer all those questions, and it's a tough question, I know, but still, it doesn't deter you from,
Yeah.
the goal that we have. Like, even if you see discrepancy in the community,
Yes.
and it's there.
Yeah. We experience, I think about the cancer sharing circle that we had, right?
Right.
I think, isn't that a good example of what we're talking about?
Yes.
And I think the more we learn and understand, we can kind of push to go forward, right? And so we for listeners, we were working on the Indigenous cancer strategy, and we talked a lot about wanting to hear directly from Indigenous community members who had gone through cancer or their loved ones had gone through cancer. And we invited community members out for that discussion. And this was the first time the hospital had done something like this, right? So we didn't exactly know how this would go, what we were doing, but we worked together with you, we worked together with SOHAC to embark on this. And I think we heard loud and clear from community their experiences in the cancer program and how we showed up in the circle, honestly, right? And I think it was hard for community, and it was hard for the leadership in the hospital and the different people that showed up, right? But I think, something I was always taught was it's what happens after that's the test of who you are, your integrity, right? Your intentions and that relationship. So I think, we debriefed, right, as a team, debriefed with SOHAC team, we debriefed together, and we focused on how can we do better, how can we learn, right? How can we show up in a better way and continue this work, that this shouldn't, right? The facts are the facts, is that a lot of communities don't trust the hospital. Outcomes are worse, right? And it can't, hearing that can't deter us, right? It's hard to hear, but it needs to encourage us, right? So I think we've decided, right, we need to do this again, and we need to keep on talking. And hopefully over time we develop some, we take what we heard and we move it into action, and hopefully that builds trust and we can make small changes over time.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the goal, I think, especially with our way of healing, like at that cancer circle, like if we were able to bring our own traditional healing practices, smudging and Indigenous ceremony in hospital, you'll see a different atmosphere just because they know that it's respected.
Yeah.
You get kicked out of the hospital to do a smudging ceremony. That's just not acceptable anymore.
No.
There needs to be a space for all this, and
Yes.
these things come to light at these gatherings.
Totally. Yeah.
Person in need at the time, cancer, might be, growing, and then they need to have that spiritual care.
Totally.
But you can't get kicked outside and do it. You got to be in the confines of that building to do it. And that's where I think changes is coming. We're not there yet. We don't have the smudginators and all the stuff there.
But we're working on it.
Yeah, and we're working on it now.
Yeah, so we're updating our smudging policy now, right? And working actually with Cambridge Memorial Hospital and Guelph Hospital.
Right.
And so I think many hands make light work, and we
Absolutely.
can learn from each other. And the discussion is, how do we bring ceremony as close to the patient as possible with as few barriers as possible, right? Right now we have the sanctuary right now, and that's the place where it has the HVAC, but what about for those patients who can't leave their unit, right? That's the questions now. How do we make sure that they have access to smudging and they don't have to go outside in the winter to smudge? That's not right? So I think that's it takes time, takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of people coming together to do it, but it's exciting when you see yourself asking the next question, even if, we feel like we should already be there, but let's get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's been a pleasure working with you on this and building this up as far as we've got to this point. There's more to do.
A lot more.
We have a lot more to do. And now that we have some voices in the community that can aid that, process and help our policies, change the ones who, have detracted from the needs, especially in the Indigenous community. But all community members, not just Indigenous. I think the ceremonies that we do, I think it's just all on that beginning path of reconciliation.
Yes.
And I think people are looking at our model now, from other regions to say, I spoke with somebody from Ontario Health just the other day, and they want to collaborate more, like what we're doing and how we're going to be doing this type of work together. Yeah. So I didn't know my role was going to go here either. My role as chief and other things that I've done got me to look at things a little bit more deeply, like health, and working at the Faculty of Health here. We're working on programs here now that'll let people know about Indigenous health, let them know that there's health funding, for Indigenous people and stuff like that. So I work with pharmacy, I work with optometry and other areas here at the university. So, we're able to at least now get out of the educational level to know that there's things that we can do together. So, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate our conversation today. It was just so enlightening again because over time you kind of forget things, and I remember, when we talk and it's what we're supposed to do is put us back to where we started and why we're doing what we do and how we can still grow from that. So absolutely. I don't think we would have got as far without you. I think, because people take on a job description, and I don't need to do that. It doesn't fit in my job description, but I think you've widened that description to make it fit what it needed to be.
I'm not sure people always appreciate that, but yes.
But that's okay. I think
it's, I think the exciting thing is like I was seconded to this work without a job description, and as we worked together, I think it became clearer and clearer and clearer what needed to be happened, and then clearer that we needed more help, right? And that willingness to grow and evolve has been awesome.
And to witness all that, to me, it's just been amazing. So I want to thank you for everything you've done and what we're still going to do. There's important work, still in front of us. So let's continue on in this good way, and we'll see the results. I know, and it's going to be good.
Happy to walk side by side.
Awesome, appreciate that. So our guest is Christine Peters. She's worked very hard, as in our conversation you heard how important it is for us to work as allies and to grow, especially in the area of health. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, it's not just at the municipal and the city levels, it's at the larger levels where we have to continue to battle for the land itself. The health of the land depicts how our health is going to be. So if we work together with the institutions, the segments of society, to have a foundational piece that reflects Indigenous theory, we can actually probably make this world a better place. And that's just not Indigenous from Canada. If you look at Indigenous people around the world, you'll find a common theme of wellness and healing. But let's be honest, let's be respectful to our mother, the earth, and all the natural elements that Creator gave us on this earth. So I'm going to close out today's show at this time, but I just want to say it's always an honor to chat with our guests and to hear their perspectives, current events that are taking place in the First Nation and Indigenous communities here. And we'll continue to do this. We'll learn and we'll grow. And Nish Vibes is really here. I hope we get a chance to fit in some Gladwin's music today in today's show. But if not, you'll hear him at many other shows. And think about him as he's in the music industry trying to grow music to the Indigenous world in all the sectors. So with that said, I want to say thank you to our technician today. She's her first show, and she's done a great job. So I really appreciate all your work, Mental Health. Thanks for all your work. And University of Waterloo, miigwech. We'll see you again next time. June is Indigenous History Month and Pride Month. So if you get a chance to go to any of the festivals or things that are happening in June, please feel free to do so. With that said, Bama Pi Minwa. Thanks, Christine, for your presence today. And thank you, audience. Miigwech, Bama Pi Minwa.